Hello, my name is Daniel. I am the Pavement Poet, as they do call me, which you can kind of see me doing. Now, my job, as it were, is to write poetry on the streets and interact with the spaces and get people to interact with poetry in all kinds of fascinating and interesting ways. One of the things I do, I like to ask questions. I really like to ask questions. And I'm sat there one day and I am noticing that people are making an effort to walk around the poetry. And my first thought was, well, that's nice and respectful of them. They're not wanting to ruin these chalk words. But then I decided to put things to the test and, just sort of see what happened. So I covered the wall to wall with poetry, and I did these paths going through the poetry. And the idea was that people would follow the path, and the poetry was laid out so that all the poetry was facing the path. So long as you stuck to that path, all the poetry was written and laid out for you. But what I discovered over the course of the day as I was sat there writing poetry and watching people, as you can see, these two ladies here, they're just sort of walking through the poetry, and they're not really looking to their left or their right, despite the fact the poetry's all laid out for them. And they keep on walking, and they're still not really looking to their left or right. They're just sort of busily engaged in their conversation, going from A to B. Now, that naturally, the nature of a town or city centre is that people are constantly going from A to B. They may be coming to or from work, they may be doing some shopping, they may be doing any number of things. But what I noticed is that the people who were going from A to B and were maybe walking down the street but not really paying much attention and finding themselves surrounded by these words, just sort of stood in a sea of words, were the ones more likely to stop and read, as opposed to the people who were spotting the path. Now, the people spotting the path, clearly, they'd seen what was going on because they saw enough to follow the path. So why was it that they chose not to engage in the poetry? Who knows, but I found myself thinking it kind of says something about life, about people in general, and that those who stick to the path rigidly in life and don't really take the time to look to the left or right of that path, more often than not, they don't really discover many interesting things. They're too busy, too focused on staying on the right path. But those people who take a little bit of time to wander off the path and get a little bit lost, are the ones that quite often find themselves stood in that sea of words, as it were, discovering all kinds of colourful and interesting things as they go about their lives. Now, one of the many things I do is I like to get a bit political with my poetry. I like to challenge the status quo. I like to ask big questions. And this one day, I've written this poem, which you can just make out on the floor there, and I'll read out in a sec. But I've written this poem, and this poem ultimately it questions the nature of the necessity for young men to risk their lives in various foreign wars. As I've just finished writing that one and carried on, this character wanders up with his prosthetic leg, and he stood there reading this poem, and he's not been reading it long. He's got what I'll assume must have been about the third line, where I'm talking about young men missing their legs and whatnot, and he started laughing, stood there with his false leg. I later found out it had been blown off in a war zone. It was quite amazing, really, that the guy could stand there laughing. But that poetry goes, fight for queen and country, they only ask you die, or that your legs are blown to bits as shrapnel blinds your eyes. For sure you will go travel to where the bombs explode, and friends they lay there dying for reasons not their own. Now, somewhat bizarrely, as this whole scene was unfolding in front of me, I've written this poetry. The guy with the bendy, springy cheetah leg is turned up, and he stood there reading this poem. And then the next thing I know, this happens. The Sherwood Foresters go marching past, and I'm stood there and I'm thinking to myself, wow, this was really meant to be. But that whole event that day, first with the poem, and I'll actually tell you a little bit about a story about the character in the last one. There we go. There he is again. As he's reading this poem, he's actually quite moved by this poem. And he stood there, and he's probably there alone with his own thoughts, thinking about friends, or I don't know, missing his leg, or whatever it is he's doing. And this young lad has walked up with 2 or 3 of his friends, and he's walked through the poetry like this, scraping his feet all along. And then all of a sudden, this cat has just grabbed him by the scruff of the neck and just screamed in his face, "Show some respect!" And got most upset by the situation. But what I'm essentially saying is art, poetry, it's a great way to discuss some of the major issues of the world today. More often than not, we get our news, our opinions from the mass media, the television, all kinds of places that have all kinds of vested interests. You know, some people might watch the debate shows in Parliament and get their opinions from them. Personally, I wouldn't recommend it. But there are many sources for news and opinion these days, and art, I can't help but feel personally, has become very, very safe in recent years. It doesn't really like to challenge the status quo. It doesn't really like to challenge accepted norms, with the exception of a few artists such as Banksy, maybe. So that's what I try to do. I like to challenge those norms where possible, and as you can see, it sometimes gets me into trouble, because I find my work being censored. I'd written this poem one day. It was run up to Christmas, and I'm not a big fan of Christmas. I'm a druid, I'm a pagan, so I celebrate winter solstice. But I'm sat there, and somebody had said to me, "Oh, you know, you need something Christmassy." So I thought, okay, you know, I'll write a grumpy Christmas poem about Santa Claus. And all I did was ask in the process of this poem about the nature of what Santa does, and how we would respond to such things in our modern world. To give you a picture, a man with a very large beard climbs down your chimney and sneaks into your children's room. What do you do? And I was kind of just discussing the nature of this interaction with a bearded man hiding in your children's bedroom. And a police officer came along. He wasn't too impressed, and he told me it was offensive to Santa Claus, and if I didn't clean it up immediately, I would be arrested for a public order offence. So after arguing with him for a little bit, I decided to clean it up, but then I've written censored across it, which got him incredibly upset. Mainly because he couldn't arrest me for writing censored, but, you know, there you go. And he then stormed off, quite upset by the whole situation. But there's been quite a response from the public. The public love what I do, because as Dimitri was saying before me, about questioning the way in which people interact with the public space, not just with the building, kind of links in with pretty much what I do here, because to give you an example, I was in Leeds, and I'm writing poetry, and I had what must have been the best response I've ever had in any city I've ever been through. Overwhelmed by the number of people. There was a constant crowd stood around this poetry, reading this poetry. But about an hour and a half after I've started, somebody from Leeds City Council's head of cleansing came along and informed me that I wasn't allowed to deface the street because it was making it messy, and they'd signed up to a business partnership. Now, the business partnership, what this was, is it was Leeds City Council sitting down with local business and saying, right, what do you want from your city centre? And they signed this Leeds business partnership, and one of the points in that partnership was that Leeds City Council would commit to cleaning up any mess within an hour, whether or not that mess is of an artistic nature. And, you know, so I find myself asking as well, you know, I mean, in this situation, the council, they've sat down with local business, but at no point during this whole process has anybody actually sat down with the public, the people who work in the city centre, who shop in the city centre, who socialise in the city centre. And they never actually asked them. They never actually said to them, what do you want from your city centre? So here we had this huge disconnect between what the local business wanted and what the public wanted and what the local council wanted, just to keep the businesses happy and keep the local economy running smoothly. So, you know, it's too much emphasis placed on maybe, you know, economics and keeping business interests happy, when what we really could be doing is trying to find new ways to get society or to get people to interact with their public spaces. Here is a photo from Swindon. What's actually happening here is the local council in Swindon tried to issue me with an ASBO at one point, or they threatened me with an ASBO for quote unquote persistent writing of poetry and other musings. Not much I can say about that really, but the response was, I went on Facebook, somebody set up an event on Facebook, and the next thing we know, we have a mass chalk-off in the centre of Swindon. Parents turn up with their kids, teenagers turn up, you know, there were a few 30, 40-year-olds, you know, wandering around trying to be young again. And, you know, it was quite an interesting, colourful experience. And, you know, even the police said, you know, because they were stood there watching, and they said, you know, it was great, you know, it was like a one-off, a great way to get people to just engage in the town centre and bring a lot more life to what was, I mean, anyone who's been through Swindon will know it's a very standardised town centre, you know, the same shops you find everywhere else, with nothing really, no life in the street. And that's what this does, it brings life into the street. So yes, I've got a Facebook page going these days, the Pavement Poet, and you can probably get a better idea of the way in which I can interact with spaces and such like on there. I travel from town to town. I live a somewhat unusual life, which is what probably enables me to write about such unusual things in the street. But yes, that is me. Before I shoot off, does anyone have any questions at all? No? Awesome.
I was wondering, how do you, not to be rude or anything, but how do you make a living?
How do I make a living? I put a tin out, and people either put something in it, or they don't. So essentially I'm busking with it, but you know, it's different. I'm not playing music, it's totally silent. One of the things I like about what I do is the silence of it, because you may have, say, 20 poems written down on the floor, 10 people come along, you've got one reading one reading another, you know, because there's no noise, you know, you can go through them all, you can maybe read a few of them. If I was singing, you'd only hear one song at a time, part of a song at a time. So people can really engage with these things at their own pace, and they're left with their own thoughts, you know. I only write a poem, so somebody may read that poem, and they may take their own thought or their own idea or whatever away from it. They can only take what they take away from it. You know, I'm not there to argue with them. At that point, I'm usually drinking tea or busy writing another poem or just staring at the sky. But, you know, it's a somewhat interesting way to spend the day and a somewhat interesting way to spend the life. And it gets me from A to B. The long-term plan is to publish the photos of the poetry in the street in the book, because what I do is about so much more than just the poetry. The poetry is an element, but there's also the impermanence of the human thought that I'm demonstrating, because to give you an example, in Cardiff on one day, I've written a load of poems on the street, I've disappeared, come back the next day, it's the middle of summer, so the poems are still there, they've not been washed away, and it's on a little side street where they can't get the street sweeper, so I was able to continue. But as the second day unfolded, you had the older poems chalked there amongst the newer ones, so you've got faded ones and clear ones, and the point I'm making here about the impermanence of the human thought is that the chalk poems are like our thoughts as we go through life. You know, you're all young, you know, we're constantly, you know, changing as we go through life. The one thought we have at one moment, let's call it a chalk poem, you know, you can have that thought, but as the thought fades and vanishes with the wind or the rain or the street sweeper or the people walking over it, so does our own thoughts. You know, we may change our opinion on things, you know, any number of times over the course of 10 years. May hold a view on one thing one day, but change our view and hold an opposite view the next day, or a slightly evolved view. The human thought itself is totally impermanent. Banksy talks about impermanence, but I personally got a bit of a bee in my bonnet about Banksy because he uses spray paint. I like his imagery, I like his artwork, but he uses spray paint, and it's not the most impermanent way to do things when you can literally, you know, tear up a floor and sell it. I think if anyone teared up the floors I wrote on, they'd probably lose the artwork in the process if the rain didn't beat them to it. So yes, there's a good way to demonstrate impermanence and just sort of move around from A to B. And yeah, bit of waffling there, but I'll put a 10 out is the short answer. Any other questions?
If you have a question, then please wait for the microphone. So.
Yep, I think we've got some hands.
Up there.
At the front.
How did you get involved with it in the first place? Like, what started this? It's quite innovative.
Somewhat bizarrely, I was at a rainbow gathering, for which, for those of you who aren't in the know, as it were, it is a hippie gathering. If you think your stereotypical hippie gathering, loads of naked people sat in a field around a fire. I was at one of these, and I'm sat there by the fire, dressed on this occasion. And I'm sat there by the fire one day, and a friend of mine, he's got the talking stick, and we use the talking stick because, you know, everyone gets heard and everyone gets a chance to speak. So the sticks come to him, and he started talking about lighting fires with chalk. And I'm sat there and I'm thinking, I spend my life outside. I've lit a lot of fires. I've never lit no fire with no chalk. So I've waited patiently for the stick to come around to me, and then I've said, how the hell do you go lighting fires with chalk? And I passed the sticker on, it's gone around the circle, it's come back to him. He said, I've been writing inspirational quotes on the floor with chalk and lighting a fire in people's hearts. And that was his roundabout way, being him, of telling me to do something. You know, he doesn't tell directly, he just sort of throws it into the circle, and if the message is meant to be picked up, it will. That's the guy's attitude. But about 2 weeks later, just after the summer solstice, I started writing the poetry on the floor. Started in Swindon, went on to Bath, Cardiff, Aberdare, Swansea, Peterborough, Norwich, Stamford, all over the place. So I've been to Leeds, Nottingham, London, Lowestoft, generally all over the place. And you know, the idea is to take it to Ireland and Scotland this year, and I don't know, possibly abroad next year. But yeah, it kind of just happened, really, as these things often do, I think. Any more questions? One more, maybe?
So you talk about impermanence. So are they completely impulsive, and do you sort of keep a record, or how is it done?
I take photographs of the pictures, of the poems, for the purpose of putting them in a book. But in terms of the poetry in the street, it is totally impermanent. The thoughts are usually had in the moment, as it were. They may be loosely based on my experience over the past few days. I may talk about nature. I may talk about, you know, political issues, as I'm just sat there doing what I do and questioning things, or just being gobby, as some people might say. And they generally, you know, talk about all things. The impermanence. There's the impermanence from the legal standpoint, in that by using chalk, I don't get arrested for criminal damage. But there's mainly the impermanence in the sense of demonstrating that impermanence of the human thought, because the poetry really does, you know, come and go. So the thought can be had in a moment. I write it down, I take a picture, probably forget about it, and won't really look at it again until I'm going through the photos for the book. The idea eventually is to put those photos in a book. So maybe that isn't in itself so impermanent, but you know, the art's no longer there itself, and all you've got really is a picture of the memory of the thought, in the same way that, say, you could write a thought down, but you know, change your mind about that thought a year later, because I don't know, you've had another experience or learned something new, and the thoughts altered, changed, or evolved. So it's a demonstration of that, really. But yes, for those of you who are interested in finding out more, just go onto Facebook and type in the Pavement Poet. So on that note, I will thank you for your time.